Joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman Karen Bass of California. She sits on the Judiciary and Foreign Affairs Committee. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
So let's talk about this report, because you know how politics goes. And even though this is a report from Mr. Horowitz, who's been roundly praised by Democrats and Republicans alike, it's going to get spun all different ways by politicians of both parties. But here's what former Utah Representative Jason Chaffetz, a Republican, said to the New York Times this morning about it. Quote, "Republicans and Democrats alike really need to take to heart whatever he finds, even if it doesn't fit our political agendas. People will spin and throw political barbs, but if you read the actual text, my gut is that's the truth." Do you agree that politicians shouldn't spin this, should take it as fact?
Absolutely. I think, again, you cited Horowitz's reputation. I do think that's right. I do agree with Jason. However, I think that the purpose of this report from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle is to continue to develop the narrative that the Department of Justice should be completely discredited, and that Comey, what he did, should weigh into the Mueller investigation, when you and I know those are apples and oranges. One is not connected to the other.
So respectfully, Congresswoman, it's not your colleagues on the other side of the aisle that wrote this report. I mean, Mr. Horowitz worked under the Bush administration, the Obama administration.
No, what I was saying was how I believe my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will spin the report.
All right, well, let's wait. Let's reserve judgment, okay, until that happens. Let's reserve that judgment.
Let me get you. Hours.
All right. Let me get you on North Korea, because you sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I'd like your reaction to the president speaking with Bret Baier on Fox News. And we heard it a little bit earlier in the show, but he was asked about the executions under the Kim regime in North Korea. And he responded by saying, look, he's a tough guy. That's a quote. And then he said, quote, he's very smart. He's a great negotiator. I think we understand each other. And he went on to say, yeah, sure, he does these horrible things, but so do a lot of other people. I'm paraphrasing on that. What's your reaction when you hear that?
Well, when I hear that, I think it's very sad. I also think that on the world stage, we look ridiculous. He says these comments and goes into these meetings right after completely disrespecting our most closest allies in the G7. And so the way the rest of the world looks at North Korea, they look at him and they just understand how superficial he is. I wouldn't be surprised if he is not fully aware of the history of North Korea. I'm sure he's not aware of the numerous times that they've made commitments and violated them. He said he had no interest in really preparing for it. And then what happened? Kim Jung Un came right out and said that Trump was going to lift sanctions.
Okay. The president didn't say he had no interest in preparing. He said a lot of it was gut instinct. He'd know in the first minute who he was dealing with. His team says they thoroughly prepared him. I take your point, but
to me, that's pretty close.
Let me see what you think about this, because Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana this morning, who does speak out against the president when he disagrees with the president, he said, look, this is the president treating Kim Jung Un with kid gloves, per se, as a negotiating tactic. Listen to this.
I think the president's trying to negotiate a denuclearization pact. And meaning no disrespect, I think anybody who has intellect above that of a single-cell organism understands that when you're trying to negotiate a deal, you don't walk in and slap your opponent and call them an ignorant slut.
He has a way with words. He certainly does.
He does.
But do you think, Congresswoman, that today America is safer from the threat from North Korea than at least it was on Monday?
Oh, well, you know what? I also think today we are safer than we were when the president was calling the leader Rocket Man and talking about whose buttons were bigger. So absolutely, I do think that's the case. The question is, how long will this last? I want to see this come out good, but I will tell you that if you read the document, and I'm sure you have, that the two of them signed, it really doesn't say very much. So, we will see what Secretary Pompeo is able to do with it.
I have read it. It does not say complete and irreversible denuclearization.
Right.
Pompeo pushed back and said, look, that was the understanding. Let's see what comes of this for the betterment of the entire world, right? Before you go, you were a surrogate for President Obama, speaking out on his behalf during the 2012 campaign. Even he said, you'll remember, all the way back in 2007, when he was asked in a CNN debate whether he would meet with the leaders of regimes like North Korea without preconditions,
right.
and he said he would. Do you think that President Obama could have, should have done more on North Korea?
I'm not sure if he could have or should have done more. He definitely tried. And again, I don't have a problem with the fact that Trump wanted to meet with him. What I do have a problem with, though, is him saying he wants to rely on his gut instincts, him feeling as though there's not a tremendous need to understand history. You know, the North Koreans have agreed to denuclearize a number of times over the last 30 years, and every single time they broke the agreement. So I think that although President Obama said he would go in without conditions, I have no doubt that he would have spent a tremendous amount of time studying history, listening to experts, and going through what had happened in the past.
The fact is, though, that President Obama didn't have the meeting with the North Korean leader. President Trump did. What comes of it, we will see.
We'll see.
Congresswoman Karen Bass of California, it's nice to have you this morning. Thanks for being here.